Don Roberts, radio announcer extraordinaire. He's given up he was on the UNB radio station, and he had a music, an hour music program for years. He followed through the generations. Grew up in downtown Fredericton, George Street, George and Brunswick and the Upper End. He has managed McKelman's gift shop and tobacco store in Fredericton, which was an institution in the 40s and 50s, where everyone shopped and you didn't have the variety that you did now. He went to the UNB bookstore, where he was the assistant manager and brought it back to solvency from where it had gone. He was a successful businessman in both places. He was on the board of the York Sunbury Historical Society for 10 years. Served him. I think he missed one meeting in 10 years. He went to St. John in the middle of the snowstorm. He couldn't make it back or something like that. He's been a friend. I've heard lots of stories, and he's told us great stories at our Christmas parties over the years, and he's going to give you another glimpse into Fredericton's past, and they're detailed and they're excellent. So thank you, Don, and
here I am again. Okay, this first part of my program here was from a Gleaner in 1994, and the Gleaner was celebrating 100 years at that time of Christmas, winter, and all that goes with it. So I'd like to say Fredericton 1894. It was an unusually mild fall and a very green Christmas coming up, everyone felt. The weather was somewhat like this year of 2017. But back in 1894, the snow began about 4 a.m. on December the 24th. And all the citizens awoke in the city on Christmas morning to a very white Christmas. It was a heavy snowfall, and it just came down in buckets, as we would say, something like the rain does. It was a deserted city when a torrential rainstorm came. And on December the 27th, the wildest storm of the winter came, leaving the city at a standstill. The weather men in Ottawa had warned us of a bad winter, the same as he's been warning us of this one. Very cold, plenty of snow. Well, the Christmas season reminds me of so many citizens of Fredericton that I used to know, and they are no longer with us, unfortunately, because they were really part of the city. Let's remember people like Fred Pridham. Frank was the owner of Harvey Studios. He took a picture of the Queen Elizabeth in 1939 while she and her husband King George VI was visiting Fredericton during the royal tour of Canada. It became the Queen's favorite photo, and she had an enlargement framed and hung in Buckingham Palace with that lovely coat with the white fur. We also remember Hedley Forbes. He was the owner of the Ross Drug Store. He was also the mayor of Fredericton during this royal visit, 1939. He was a really nice man and one who helped many citizens of Fredericton during the Depression years of the 1930s. If you couldn't pay for a prescription or something the doctor said you had to have, he'd say, "Pay me when you can." That doesn't happen too much nowadays. Well, this store was on the corner of Queen and York Street. Going farther up the street was the Grand Hotel on Queen Street, run by Barry Kitchen and his wife. Great people. They were serving the citizens of our city, with accommodations and a dining room that was so excellent. I didn't eat there often, but once in a while we would take a day to go to the Grand Hotel. I can still see the white tablecloths, fresh flowers and vases in the center of each and every table. Dinner, the little card stood up by the flowers that said, "Dinner, 35 cents. You got soup or juice, chicken, beef, or pork, dessert, tea, and coffee. Complete dinner, think of it, 35 cents. Today, we can't even get a tea or coffee." Farther down Queen Street was Yerkes's Grocery. Elijah Yerkes, owner with the white apron, serving customers and always busy sweeping the floor, raising a very large dust. In the store was a lady called Beulah. Later on, she married Louis Jameson, another Frederictonian. She told me many years later, she said, "Don, the window, you remember, one window of the store was full of adults, mighty high in the window." And she also told me that the store cat slept during the cold winter nights in the adults. My favorite store was Eaton's grocery store. The T. Eaton Company had a lovely grocery store on the corner of Queen and York. It was called the Canadian Store. I can still see that wooden frame name called the Canadian Store's black lettering on white. Well, Eaton's brought in many wonderful Christmas goodies from Toronto, of course, their head office. These things were not available in ordinary grocery stores. That store now is called Tony's Music Store. Then down the street on Queen was Mr. Kavanaugh. He was the manager of F.W. Woolworth Company. And he presided over this store that had large quantities of giftware, confectionery extraordinaire, and the items, novelty items especially, at very low prices, just right for depression-weary customers that you just couldn't find anywhere else. Then there was a lady in town, and if you were around during the 30s and 40s, 50s, you remember her. She worked at the Capitol Theater, and her name was Florrie Finnemore. She was at the Capitol for many, many years. She took her ticket as you came in, tore it in two, and then you entered the theater. She was always looking very stern and straight-laced, but she really wasn't. Later on, we became great friends, and she shared so many tales of the Capitol and the customers. I met her one day on Queen Street. We stood talking, and a couple of businessmen came along with their briefcases, and they smiled and looked at us, and nodded their heads. And she said, "You know why they're smiling, don't you, Don?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not sure." She said, "They probably made a lot of noise in the theater and I put them out." So that's why they're laughing and smiling. Well, Florrie got very elderly and she moved to Vancouver to a nephew, and she passed away at the age of 102. And I understand she had about $2 million. Her sister Mary was at the Gaiety Theatre and she was at the Capitol. And they never paid rent. They lived up over the Gaiety Theatre in very, very nice, I must tell you, very nice an apartment. Beautiful rooms, lovely fireplaces. Anyway, she went off to, when she got very elderly and the other sisters died, she went off to Vancouver and she lasted till 102. Well, I think of this often in Fredericton and the many faces who are now gone. You can go up to the mall and sit down, have a muffin, a coffee, and look around. And all the faces you grew up with are gone. Such as Dr. and Mrs. Ashburnham Crockett, down by the cenotaph, their house with the turret. And the many Christmas trees that my sister and I joined hands and danced around singing Christmas carols. We got invited because they were friends of Mother and Father's. Then there was Fred Murphy and his wife. And they, right across from the old post office on Queen Street, they had a novelty and candy store. And the store was known as Crowley's. And boy, it had some wonderful Christmas chocolate. You just didn't see in an ordinary store. And then there was people excited about Christmas in those days that they don't seem to be now. They would stop off at the Metropolitan store and they had gift boxes, white for men, red for ladies, and green for children. And they were only 25 cents, and you bought one, and then everybody wanted to see what you got for Christmas. Oh, that was exciting during the Depression years, I'm telling you. Well, after the shoppers, bought all their gifts, you wandered up Queen Street, and you came to Billy Golden's ice cream parlor. We stopped there on your way home and had a sundae. And boy, were they wonderful. 15-cent sundaes, piled high, hand-dipped ice cream, they called it. There were special cookies stuck in the top of your sundae. And these cookies were filled with strawberry, vanilla, and chocolate cream. Boy, you just couldn't wait to get your fork or spoon into these things. Then there were the crowds that stood around outside the old provincial normal school, which is now the Justice Department, because Santa Claus appeared there for the children, and every child got a free bag of candy. Don't remember who paid for it, but Santa arrived and the children rushed over to get their free bag. Probably very simple candy, as I recall it, but was nice, free, when 5 and 10 cents during the Depression was big money to a child. Fredericton celebrated Christmas in many wonderful ways, simple, wonderful ways, but memories that have stayed forever in memory, all these many years. And that's probably 70 or 80 years ago. Well, those are the memories, little memories. There are dozens and dozens of people I could name that were interesting and very civic-minded, wonderful citizens, no longer with us, but their memories, their faces The minute you say the name, their faces pop up in front of you and you think, oh yes, I remember them. They were nice, all nice people who had a great feeling for this city. So all you have to do is think about them, and up they pop in your mind. All this many years. Well, I'm not going to keep you too long because we got gifts to pass out. So I want to wish everyone here a very Merry Christmas, and do have a wonderful Happy New Year this coming 2018. Thank you.